Hi dear children, let's now learn about the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system consists of a pair of ovaries along with a pair of oviduct or the fallopian tubes, a uterus which ends as a cervix, opens into the vagina. All these are located in the pelvic region within the abdominal cavity. These parts of the reproductive system, along with the external genitalia and a pair of mammary glands, which are located on the thoracic part of the body, are integrated structurally and functionally to support the process of ovulation, fertilization, pregnancy, birth and child care. So all these organs are part of the female reproductive system. It may sometimes help in the process of ovulation, others support fertilization. Some of the organs are responsible for implantation, pregnancy, childbirth, and post-childbirth. The mammary glands help in child care. So all of them are integral part of the female reproductive system. Let us learn more about the female reproductive system. In the female reproductive system, the ovary is the primary sex organ. Now you would recollect that a primary sex organ is one which produces the gamete as well as the sex hormones. So ovaries produce the ovum and they are also responsible for producing the sex hormones, namely estrogen and progesterone. So ovary is the primary sex organ. The pair of ovaries lie in the abdominal cavity close to the lateral wall of the pelvic cavity. It is very close to the pelvic cavity, and the ovaries are suspended from the dorsal wall of the body cavity by a fold of skin called as the mesovarium. So the dorsal part, you should understand that. See, please understand that the ovaries cannot remain floating in the cavity. So obviously they have to be supported, and the support is enabled by the mesovarium, which attaches itself to the dorsal body wall. Other than that, it is also held in position by certain ligaments. For example, there is a uterine ligament which attaches it to the uterus. Can you see this ligament? So it attaches itself to the uterine ligament as well as to the pelvic wall. There is another ligament which attaches itself to the pelvic wall known as the pelvic ligament. So the mesovarium attaches the ovary to the dorsal wall. The uterine ligament attaches itself to the uterine wall, and the pelvic ligament attaches the ovary to the pelvic wall. So the ovary is held in position by these three ligaments, by these three support. Now, regarding the structure of the ovary, we will study more about the structure of the ovary later on. The remaining part of the reproductive system are the secondary sex organs, because none of the other parts are involved in the production of gametes or hormones. So ovaries are the primary sex organ. Let us learn more about the secondary sex organ. Lying close to the ovary, okay, you can see lying close to the ovary are a pair of fallopian tubes or oviducts. They lie close. They have no physical contact. Please understand that they do not have any physical contact. They merely lie very close to the ovary. And one end of the fallopian tube is in close proximity to the ovary. Okay, this is the fallopian tube. One end is in close proximity with the ovary and the other end opens into the uterus. This oviduct or the fallopian tube has four distinct parts. The part which is lying close to the ovary is known as the dilated infundibulum. Okay, it is a funnel shaped structure, and the terminal part of the infundibulum is thrown into finger shaped fimbriae. Okay, finger shaped fimbriated end is the terminal part of the infundibulum. So you can visualize that it is a funnel shaped structure and the terminal part has finger shaped fimbriae. There is an opening in the center of the infundibulum and that opening is known as the ostium. So the first part of the fallopian tube is a funnel shaped infundibulum. Let us go to the second part. The second part is a long dilated part. Okay. The long and dilated part is known as the ampulla, and the ampulla is lined by ciliated epithelium. Okay, so the epithelium of the ampulla is lined by ciliated epithelium. Further to the ampulla, we come to the third part of the fallopian tube, which is a short straight duct. This part is a short straight duct which is known as the isthmus, and the junction between the ampulla and the isthmus is known as the ampullary isthmic junction. Now it has a significance. It is at the ampullary isthmic junction that fertilization happens, meaning the ovum which is released from the ovary moves through the ampulla and reaches this particular junction, and if sperms are deposited in the vagina, that can move through the uterus into the fallopian tube, reach the ampullary isthmic junction. So it is this particular junction where there is a union of the ovum and the sperm leading to fertilization. So it has a significance. So we have now studied the first part called as the infundibulum, the second part called as the ampulla, the third part is the isthmus. The fourth part of the fallopian tube is called as the uterine part. Uterine part of the fallopian tube is that part of the fallopian tube which opens into the uterus. So these are the four parts of the fallopian tube. Now let us study about the uterus. The uterus is morphologically differentiated or structurally differentiated into four parts. What are the four parts? A dome-shaped region which is known as the fundus. The fundus is the dome-shaped region. The second part of the uterus is that part which receives the fallopian tube, and that part is called as the cornua. So the part of the uterus which receives the fallopian tube is called as the cornua. Now coming to the third part. The third part of the uterus is the body or the corpus. The corpus or the body of the uterus is the main part where the fetus is accommodated during its growth. So that is the main part. And finally, we have the terminal part of the uterus, which is called as the cervix. The cervix, if you see, has a canal, and that canal is called as the cervical canal. The cervix has very strong sphincter muscles. Sphincter muscles are nothing but circular muscles, and the sphincter muscles of the cervix is the strongest sphincter muscles in the human body, because it can hold the weight of the fetus as well as the fluid within the uterus. Okay. Together, the combined weight of almost 7 kilograms can be held intact against the gravity, and that is why it is the strongest. So this, please understand that during the gestation period, as the fetus develops, there may be possibilities of the sphincter muscle sometimes becoming loose, and that can be a reason for miscarriage. But in normal situations, the sphincter muscles are very, very strong. Then, you can notice that there is an opening here in the cervix called as an internal os, OS, and an opening here known as the external os. The external os opens into the vagina. So this is regarding the cervix. Now, so morphologically the uterus has 4 parts: the fundus, the cornua, the corpus of the body, and the cervix. But histologically, or when you consider the arrangement of tissues in the uterus has 3 distinct tissues. The outermost part of the uterus is called as the perimetrium. Following that, there is a smooth muscle layer known as the myometrium. So that is the middle layer. The middle layer of the uterus is known as the myometrium, and the innermost layer is known as the endometrium. The endometrium has a large number of blood vessels as well as glands, meaning it is glandular and vascularized. So the endometrium is glandular and vascularized. Another feature is it shows periodic changes during the menstrual cycle, and it is at the endometrium that implantation of the embryo happens. So the endometrium has many important functions. Coming to the next part of the female reproductive system. The next part of the female reproductive system is the vagina. The cervix opens into the vagina, and the vagina is an elastic and muscular tube. It is through the vagina that the menstrual flow happens, and it is also through the vagina. The vagina has a vaginal canal. This canal is known as a vaginal canal. The vaginal canal, along with the cervical canal, We already learned about the cervical canal. The cervical canal and the vaginal canal together is known as the birth canal. And finally, the vagina opens out by the vaginal orifice or the vaginal opening, which is covered by a membrane known as hymen. So the vagina opens to the outside, to the exterior, by the vaginal opening or the vaginal orifice, which is covered by a membrane known as the hymen. Just to recap the parts of the oviduct: the infundibulum, the ampulla, the isthmus and the uterine. The infundibulum has at the free margin, finger-shaped fimbriae as well as a central opening called as the ostium. Ampulla is the dilated part, isthmus is the short straight duct, and the junction between the ampulla and the isthmus is called as the ampullary isthmic junction. It is important because fertilization happens here. Let us now study about the external genitalia. The external genitalia in female consists of a fleshy prominence which is located at the pelvic region, and that fleshy prominence is called as the mons pubis. This fleshy prominence is located above the pubic symphysis. I am sure you would recollect what the pubic symphysis is. The pubic symphysis is part of the pelvic girdle. The pelvic girdle consists of the ilium, ischium and the pubis. And the pubis joins together at the pubic symphysis. So above the pubic symphysis, there is a fleshy prominence called as the mons pubis. And this mons pubis has adequate deposition of adipose tissue, and it also has the presence of external hair called as the pubic hairs. So that is regarding the mons pubis. The second part of the external genitalia is the labia majora. The labia majora are thick fleshy fold of skin that extends from the mons pubis till the vaginal opening. So it extends from the mons pubis and till the vaginal opening, the labia majora. There is a pair of labia majora, two folds of thick fleshy skin. They are actually thick fleshy skin. The third part is the labia minora. The labia minora are thin folds of skin. These thin folds of skin lie within the labia majora. They are very thin and they lie within the labia majora. Following that, there is an structure called as clitoris. The clitoris lie between the labia minora and it is synonymous with the penis, meaning it has the same function as that of a penis. It's an erectile body, very small in structure, and you can compare it with the penis of the males. The last one is the hymen. The hymen, as I told you earlier, is a skin which covers the vaginal orifice or the vaginal opening. This hymen may be broken during the first sexual intercourse, or it can also be broken when there is physical exercise like running, jumping or horse riding or vigorous kind of exercise may cause the rupture of a hymen. So it may get ruptured during the first sexual intercourse, or it may also get ruptured during any other activity. Meaning, earlier there was a myth. The myth was centered around the presence of the hymen indicates the virginity of a child. However, that is only a myth since it can be broken at any point of time. The presence or absence of the hymen is not at all an indication of virginity. We now study about the mammary glands. Mammary glands are characteristic features of all mammals, especially in the females. Now, typically speaking, mammary glands are modified sweat glands, and these modified sweat glands actually are located as thoracic protuberances. Okay, they are seen in the thoracic region. Thoracic protuberances as two rounded structures. These protuberances have in the central part a dark circular pigmented area called as the areola. So the pigmented portion of the mammary glands or the breast are the areola. And regarding the mammary glands typically are required by the female after the parturition. Once the baby is born, after parturition, the baby has to be given milk, and the mammary glands are responsible for the production of milk. Now let us see the structure. Each mammary gland consists of around 15 to 20 mammary lobes. Can you see? This is one lobe, this is another lobe, the third lobe, and so on. So there are many, almost 15 to 20 mammary lobes. And these lobes are separated by adequate deposits of adipose tissue as well as connective tissue. So the connective tissue and adipose tissues separate these mammary lobes. Within these lobes, we find the presence of mammary glands. Okay? These structures are mammary glands and they are alveolar in nature. You can see the alveolar nature of the mammary glands. Arising from each of these mammary glands, okay, these mammary alveolar glands are tiny ducts, and these ducts are called as the mammary tubules. Okay, these are the mammary lobes, these are the mammary alveoli, and arising from the mammary alveoli are small ducts called as the mammary tubules. Many of these tubules join together to form a larger tube called as a mammary duct. Okay, you can see these mammary ducts. So small tubules arise from individual mammary lobes and they all join together to form the mammary duct. This is a mammary duct. Many such mammary ducts join together and they form a mammary ampulla, which is a dilated portion. Can you see? These are all mammary ampullae. See, this is one ampullae, this is another one, and so on. So many mammary ducts join together to form a dilated mammary ampulla. And it is within this mammary ampullae that the milk is temporarily stored. Okay. Then, arising from these ampullae are again short straight ducts. Short straight ducts called as the lactiferous ducts. And all these lactiferous ducts open at the tip of the areola at a portion called as the nipple. So the lactiferous ducts open at the nipple. Now, What exactly is the function? Let us see. Now, before that, let me tell you that at the thoracic region, there is a very important muscle which supports the mammary gland, and that muscle is known as the pectoralis major muscle. So, the muscle which is seen beneath the mammary gland is the pectoralis major muscle. The mammary glands are directly under the influence of two hormones. One hormone which is known as the prolactin. The prolactin is produced by the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary influences the mammary glands to produce the milk. So, prolactin is for milk production, whereas the second hormone is known as the oxytocin. Oxytocin is produced by the posterior pituitary, and the posterior pituitary which produces oxytocin is responsible for milk ejection. So, whenever there is a stimulation, whenever there is a suckling instinct, when the baby suckles at the nipple, immediately oxytocin is released. And oxytocin in turn reaches the smooth muscles of the mammary glands at the areolar region and causes the contraction of the smooth muscles. The smooth muscles, when it contracts, along with the suckling of the baby, causes pressure on the ampulla, and at the ampulla the milk is stored, and this milk now is ejected out through the lactiferous ducts, through the nipple into the mouth of the suckling baby. So these are the two hormones which influences the mammary glands: prolactin, which produces the milk, and oxytocin, which releases the milk or which ejects the milk. Hence, oxytocin is also called as milk ejection hormone. Let us now study about the internal structure of the ovary. The ovary is just 2 to 4 centimeter long. Okay, it's a very small structure. It is almond shaped. Okay, it has the shape of an almond. And anatomically speaking, okay, it has 4 parts. The outermost part is known as the germinal epithelium. Okay, the outermost part is the germinal epithelium. And this germinal epithelium has a number of oogonia, or the ovum mother cell, meaning it is from this oogonium that the follicle starts developing. So the outermost layer is known as the germinal epithelium. Just inner to that, there is the tunica albuginea. I'm sure you remember what tunica albuginea. We are very familiar with this terminology. So next to the germinal epithelium, we have the tunica albuginea. The third part, okay, this is the interior of the ovary, and the interior of the ovary is distinguished as an outer region called as the cortex. Okay, this whole part is known as the cortex, and an inner region called as the medulla. So an outer cortex and a medulla. So anatomically, these are the 4 parts of the ovary: the outermost germinal epithelium, followed by the tunica albuginea, then comes the cortex and the medulla. Let us learn more about the cortical region. The cortex has a large number of connective tissues with fibroblasts, and it also has the ovarian follicles in various stages of development. Okay, the ovarian follicles are seen in various stages of development. Now, if you notice, you can see a number of primordial follicles. Primordial follicles are nothing but follicles which later on give rise to the ovarian follicles. Following the primordial follicles, we see a number of primary follicles. It is in the most developing stage. The first developing stage is known as a primary follicles. Primary follicles grow into secondary follicles. We also find within the cortex tertiary follicles and matured follicles called as the Graafian follicles. After that, the Graafian follicles, they rupture, and when they rupture, they release the secondary oocyte or an ovum. You can see in all these follicles the development of a secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte actually develops into an ovum. So, when a mature Graafian follicle ruptures, a secondary oocyte or an ovum is liberated. This Graafian follicle, upon rupture, it gradually changes into an endocrine gland called as the corpus luteum. And this corpus luteum, after a period of time, gradually changes into a scar tissue called as corpus albicans. So, within the cortex of the ovary, we notice the presence of connective tissues, fibroblasts, ovarian follicles in various stages of development like primary follicle, secondary follicle, tertiary follicle, Graafian follicle, a ruptured follicle, corpus luteum and corpus albicans. So these are the different things that we find in the cortex. Other than that, there are few blood vessels also seen in the cortical region. Coming to the medullary region. The medulla of the ovary shows the presence of connective tissue as well as fibroblast, elastic fibers, smooth muscle fibers, and the most important thing is it is richly supplied with blood vessels. You can see the blood vessels, okay, an artery and a vein. Other than the artery and a vein, we also find smooth muscle fibers, nerve fibers, as well as elastic fibers. So this is the medullary part of the ovary. Now, let me tell you some more things about the ovarian follicle. The ovarian follicles at birth, okay, a child is born with almost 1.2 to 1.6 lakh ovarian follicle in each of her ovaries. Though very few have been represented in the diagram, please understand that at birth, a child has almost 1.2 to 1.6 lakh ovarian follicles. Gradually, as the girl approaches puberty, some of these follicles starts degenerating. So by the time she approaches her puberty or her menarche, she has only 60,000 to 80,000 in each of her ovary. From menarche, that is from puberty till menopause, okay, so from an age of 13 till an age of almost 50, only 450 of these follicles mature, okay, meaning in her reproductive age, there are only 450 follicles that are likely to mature. All the other follicles die, okay, not die, they degenerate. And this process of degeneration of the ovarian follicles is known as follicular atresia. Okay, it is seen that only 450 of these follicles mature during the reproductive life of a female.